Paramotor wing versus paraglider wing. What the heck is the difference? Let's talk about it. Hey there, my name is Trevor Steele, and over the last 13 years, I've trained over 704 paramotor pilots. And in today's video, I want to break down the differences between a paramotor wing and a paragliding wing. Let's jump right into it. A brief disclaimer, this kind of a video is difficult because it is generalizing an entire category of gliders. Every brand, every model of wing is different, and the manufacturer and the designer of each wing can totally change how the glider is going to be. So don't take any of this as a rule of thumb. This is just a commonality and a generalization of what I've seen. The whole point of this video is education and helping you further your understanding of these gliders, because we believe the better you understand them, the better pilot you are. With all of that being said, first and foremost, the glider itself doesn't know if you're in a paragliding harness, kiting harness, or a paramotor. But how they build this glider, how the glider is trimmed, and how the glider is designed to be flown does totally change how it flies. Although paramotoring and paragliding are very similar disciplines, the way the gliders need to behave is very different. Let's talk about some of the main differences between the two. Paraglider pilots are typically flying in more windy conditions. This is because they're launching on the side of a hill in pursuit of either ridge lift, which is the wind blowing up an object, creating an upward flow that they can fly, or thermic lift, which is pockets of hot rising air that they can circle inside of to fly to the top. Paramotor pilots are typically flying in little to no wind conditions, launching on flat and level ground and being pushed by the paramotor itself. Let's break down what changes between the two gliders. There's this thing called trimming, and I don't mean the trim tabs themselves, which we're going to talk about in a minute, but I mean how the glider is designed to sit over your head. Essentially the line lengths and where they want it to be sitting when it's in its normal flying configuration. That's a very generalized basic way of breaking it down. They trim gliders very differently for paramotoring than they do for paragliding. When you're paragliding and you're launching on the side of a mountain, the last thing you want is for your glider to want to come surging all the way forward, frontaling and collapsing. They want that glider to sit further back. Whereas paramotoring, they need that glider to come all the way up overhead, and they want it to stay overhead for longer, more easily, and without stalling, because you're launching from flat and level ground in nil wind conditions where you have to be running really hard to get that glider up overhead, and you want it to come up easy and stay above your head easily. So the basics of that are this. A paraglider wing is designed to sag back a little bit more. It is not designed to come all the way up and overhead, because if it did, paraglider pilots would struggle more on the side of the mountain with keeping it from frontaling over their head. But a paramotor pilot has the opposite concern. A paramotor pilot wants it to come all the way up overhead. They don't want it to sag back, because a saggy wing in zero wind or nil wind conditions, when you're doing a forward inflation on a hot day in the summer, is super difficult to get inflated. So they trim the gliders differently. Then when it comes to performance in the air, paraglider pilots and paramotor pilots want two very different things. In paragliding, they are optimizing for two things: glide slope and sink rate. If you're not familiar with what these two are, glide slope is the amount of distance you cover for the amount of altitude you had. This is typically said in a number like 10 to 1, meaning you'll go 10 feet forward for every 1 foot down. Sink rate is essentially how slowly you are going to descend in altitude. Similar to glide slope, but slightly different. Paramotor pilots don't care nearly as much about these two things. In fact, I would go as far as saying most paramotor pilots could not care less about these two things, because what we care about is MPL, miles per liter of fuel burned. That is one of the things we care about. The second thing we care about is speed. And it's not that we're trying to be speed demons. We're not trying to do 50 or 60 miles an hour the entire time, but we want to do more than 15 to 20 miles an hour. We want to actually get somewhere. We want a decent cruising speed and a strong max speed. And paramotor pilots also care about roll rate and energy. Whereas paraglider pilots aren't as concerned about roll rate. They're trying to ride this lift. They're trying to fly in thermic conditions where they're circling the thermal, or they're trying to ridge soar. It's very different. So bringing that all full circle, these two gliders are doing a similar thing. They're a piece of fabric with string and brakes and A's, and you're flying it through the sky, but they're doing it in a totally different way. They're designed for totally different jobs. It's like two different tools. Yeah, they can do the same thing. You can fly a paramotor with a paraglider wing. You can go paragliding paragliding with a paramotor wing, but they're not designed for those two jobs. The real-world application of what you'll experience is this. If you take a paragliding wing out and you want to go launch it in nil wind conditions, it's going to be very hard to get that glider to come up and stay up over your head. It's going to be more inclined to want to stall on inflation. Your brake range is going to be shorter, which means you can't pull as much without it wanting to stall behind you. And overall, launching the glider is going to be noticeably more difficult. Once you're in the air, you'll notice that glider sags back further behind you, acting more as a piece of drag, not allowing you to go as fast as you would like it to, and depending on the wing, feeling slightly uncomfortable with how far it's hanging back, especially under power. Then your miles per liter, how much distance you cover for how much fuel you're burning, is not going to be as good as your paramotor wing. Now, if you were to take a paramotoring wing paragliding, what you'll experience is the following. On inflation, it's going to be far more prone to wanting to overfly you. That's because it wants to come all the way up and be overhead, which when you're on a mountain, the overhead position is actually past the point in which it wants to frontal. So you'll have to be very heavy in brakes to stop that glider from overflying you and to keep it sitting where it should be without it frontally. Once in flight, your glide slope and your sink rate is going to be worse than a comparable paragliding wing because the paramotor glider is designed to sit further overhead because it's getting pushed by a paramotor. So it needs to trim further forward so it doesn't sag back as much so you can achieve a better miles per liter. Okay, now the next thing we do need to discuss is the trim buckles, the trim tabs themselves on a paramotor wing. Some paramotor wings are literally paragliding wings with risers that have trims. And if you trim the glider to 0 or in or all the way down, depending on how you refer to that, then it is a paragliding wing. If you trim it out, then it's going to inflate and launch better. Now, most paramotor wings that have trims trimmed all the way in are going to behave very similar to a paragliding wing. You're going to be closer to your minimum sink rate, so you're going to descend slower. The inflation is going to be harder. The stall point is easier to reach. Your brake range is shorter. All of the things that I mentioned to you earlier become true. But trims neutral or trims out is where that glider is going to want to inflate better, stay above your head better, and launch better. Now, the difference between a paraglider wing and a paramotor wing is not rocket science. It's nothing super crazy. It is simply optimizing for the task at hand. A paramotor wing is optimized for how a paramotor is flown. Nil wind conditions, flat ground, flying fast, rolling around, etc. A paragliding wing is optimized for paragliding tasks. Launch on the side of a mountain, in windy conditions, flying in thermals, flying in ridge lift, etc. Although the two can do each other's job, they are optimized for the job they are intended for. All right, you glorious people on the internet. Hopefully, in this video, you learned a couple of things about a paragliding wing versus a paramotor wing. Again, the large vision and goal with these videos is to help educate the greater paramotor community. If you are looking to learn how to fly paramotors, we do offer a very extensive, detailed, and structured 10-day beginner training program. We've been doing this for over a decade and have trained 703 paramotor students how to fly at the time of filming this video. We are currently signing up next year's students for this program. We've already got students registered, and we'd love to have you as well. Visit backcountryppg.com for more information on those programs. And thanks again for watching. We'll see you guys next time.